it is my honour to welcome Molly Kingsley.
Hi, I'm Molly Kingsley. Thank you so much, Adam, for those very generous words. It's my honour to be with you all today, and my message for you today is about faith. Faith in our ability, individually and collectively, to affect change. So some of you may know me from the pandemic period, during which I founded, together with 2 other parents, a group called UsForThem. We advocate for children and families. Before 2020, I would have called myself completely apolitical. I suppose I was in that class of very lucky citizens for whom the British state, although admittedly very imperfect, had by and large worked. It had provided me roughly with what I needed from it, and otherwise had left me and my kids alone. I'd never needed to become activist. I'd never thought I would become activist. I think, as with many, the pandemic period, or perhaps more particularly the response to the pandemic, changed all of that. That period blew apart pretty much every conception I'd held about the British state, about British democracy, about the sanctity of our political governance and decision-making processes. And it has left me with a profound sense, really, of the rank inadequacy of our current political system to make decisions that respect, let alone cater and further the interests of our next generation. Now, I'm a lawyer by training, and I could talk to you for hours about the many, frankly, astounding, it's my view, but I do believe they are astounding failures of that pandemic period. But don't worry, I'm not going to, because for today, really, the 2 things I just want to touch on are, actually, one of them's been spoken to at length by William, but the first one is the crippling short-termist nature of the decisions made during that period. And the second is the failure, collective failure, of courage, the failure to stand up during that period to what were manifestly damaging and, in some cases, unethical and even barbaric decisions. Now, of course, it would be an error to attribute all of the problems of today to those few years. But the legacy of those years continues to leave a long shadow, both in terms of the social cost and the ongoing lack of cohesion, which is only exacerbating, and of course in terms of its economic cost. And that period was an exemplar of a time during which both ideologically and economically we mortgaged our children's futures. We panic-bought quick fixes, while surrendering to the state our agency and our sense of personal responsibility for our health, our welfare, and our economic security. And regrettably, one can see this same short-termism in pretty much every aspect of political and private life. We see it in the home, where instead of using our time to nurture our children, to engage with them, to play with them, we have surrendered our agency of parenting, instead handing them iPads and devices, and then looking to schools and doctors to fix the inevitable attention deficit disorders, the emotional stress and underachievement. We see it in schools, where often the answer to address our children's needs is more devices and more technology. The age-old sense that self-improvement flows from the hard graft of human endeavour, resilience and energy is being eclipsed by the allure of quick-fix technological solutions. We see it in the way we shop, where the effort of physically going into town centres and browsing in stores can stand no match for the quick fix of the buy button. In the way we eat, where only 20% of us now say routinely we cook from scratch, And in one survey, quite a recent survey, an astounding 27% of adults claim never to have boiled an egg. And of course, we see it in health, where we prefer jabs and medicines to exercise, self-care, and effort. And where, according to one UNICEF study published just last week, for the first time ever, more children worldwide are obese than underweight. Even our out-of-control immigration issues can be seen as a symptom of the same malady. It is much quicker to import a workforce than to address the structural issues fueling the UK's skills and declining fertility rate. Skills deficit, and declining fertility rate. It is completely perverse. As William spoke so eloquently about earlier, we are borrowing from our children's futures to spend money we don't have on solutions which create a spiral of ever greater issues. And such is our commitment to short-termism that it has taken not only a wrecking ball to our children's futures, but it has taken with it age-old laws of integrity, transparency, and ethics. We saw that vividly during the pandemic, where the British state took an increasingly authoritarian, and I would say wickedly so, stance, sacrificing not only ethics, but free speech, that essential foundation on which all democracies are grounded. And we've seen it with ever greater starkness since. So, what is to be done? Well, I was catapulted into campaigning because of children, and it will be no surprise to you to hear that I believe the answer lies with children. And by this, I mean children both as the greatest asset this country has, and also as the physical embodiment of the long-term interests that are so woefully underrepresented in British politics. So, as Adam says, we are defenders of the future. We must secure this nation for those who stand to inherit it from us. We are caretakers of the present, but whether as parents or as citizens, we are bound by a contract between the dead, the living, and the unborn. We are defenders of the future. Yet our perennial failure to nurture our young people, our future, is a wasted opportunity for each child. But for the state, our economy, and our society, it is a tragic loss of potential. £1 spent in early years education, and by that I mean real professional early years education, not the kind of McDonald's nurseries that this government favours. But £1 spent in early years education has been shown to reap anything from 7 to 15 times a return to society in adulthood. Yet across-the-board investment in children and children's services has withered relative to other policy areas. Worse than this, as we've seen, instead of investing in our younger citizens, we borrow from them to pay for the budgets we can't afford for our healthcare, our welfare, our pensions. My own view, and I appreciate in what I'm about to say, I may well be in a minority of one. It is a position I am used to and I am fine with, but my own view is that the structural deficits of the British political system are such that only a radical restructuring to bring in and further the interests of children and through that the long term will facilitate the kind of systemic rebalancing that's needed. And to that end, and we'll see whether any of you clap for this one, to that end, I believe that no idea, however radical, however risible, however seemingly revolutionary, should be off the table. So some ideas that I would like to see at least debated, and debated seriously. Votes for children. I will say I do not necessarily believe that is the answer, but neither do I believe it should be laughed at. Votes for children, parental proxy votes, spoken about by J.D. Vance about a year and a half ago in the run-up to the US election, perhaps some division or section of Parliament tasked with furthering long-term interests. These things are not, in my view, risible. Ancient and modern political history, in fact, tells us that many things are laughable or unthinkable only until the moment they are not. We could barely be in a worse position than we are now, so why not start talking about some of these ideas and many others, I'm sure, seriously? Whatever form, though, it takes, I know the idea of a rebalancing of our political system sounds very ambitious, and I know many of you may think it's delusional, but I am also a realist. In a first-past-the-post, winner-takes-all political system, it's not enough to throw stones and hope that one day we'll have our turn. Instead, we must assume that if our cause and our advocacy is compelling, we will change minds and we will create our own momentum. And to achieve this, we must have faith. And I do not mean here religious faith, although I don't doubt there may be a place for that. I mean faith in ourselves, in our ability to speak difficult opinions and to catalyse change through our own advocacy. But faith alone is not enough. We must also have courage. The courage and resilience to stand behind those views even when under attack, even when under violent attack. Indeed, it is often precisely when an opinion is most controversial, most ridiculed, and most violently attacked that the need to hear and defend it is greatest. Conventional wisdom may dictate that you first focus on getting into a position of power and then you turn your mind to effecting change for your constituency or your nation, whatever that looks like. However, that isn't my experience. My experience is that the power of a few committed individuals to effect change, including on the national, indeed even on the international stage, by speaking difficult truths should not be underestimated. So my own experience, we were 3 lone parents when we launched our first campaign in May 2020 to get schools reopened. We were ridiculed, we were smeared, we were trolled. Shameful, they should be disgusted with themselves. How embarrassing, they should be ostracised. Words fail me. They were just a few of the comments from the Daily Mail article that reported that first schools campaign. Yet now, you would be hard-pushed to find a person who believes school closures were a good thing. And as it was with that first schools campaign, it has been with every campaign since. When we challenged the government on mask mandates in classrooms, we were labelled child killers, yet the policy was later revealed to be the product of a spat between Westminster and Holyrood. When we questioned the ethical basis of rolling out COVID vaccines to children, we were denigrated, yet now we know the government's own ethics committee had advised against it. And when we launched our campaign on smartphones, we were told that we had a cat's chance in hell. And yet here we are now, just 3 years later, and barely a day passes without a politician somewhere talking about the need to legislate for smartphones and social media for kids. So yeah, I speak from hard-won experience that today's unspeakable heresy becomes the opinion that tomorrow all will claim to have been self-evident from the outset. They will never give you, you'll never get any recognition usually for the fact you were saying it from the outset. But anyway, that's a different issue. So yeah, courage and faith get you far. And in our current era of political flux, I believe the SDP has a unique and vital role to play. Long-term thinking and long-term policies are in short supply, and commentary from William and his team is amongst the most thoughtful and strategic of any politician of any creed. Indeed, I believe the SDP may be the only party showing itself capable of truly intelligent, strategic, long-term thinking. And for the sake of future generations, as much as our own, we need to hear more of it and more from each of you. And I'm going to leave you on that note with one final anecdote. It's a personal one, but one which I hope will leave everyone in this room with faith in the notion that the smallest of efforts cannot be underestimated. So it was right at the start of the pandemic, before UsForThem, before I'd started any campaigns, before I even knew how to campaign. I was really, really upset about the impact of those early pandemic restrictions, school closures, social distancing on my own kids. And I decided to write a blog post. I don't know what I hope to achieve. I had, I think, 30 followers on Twitter. I don't think I knew a single politician, and I think 2 people, my mum and my husband, read that blog. But anyway, I wrote the post anyway, and when I showed it in draft form to my husband, by the way, I love dearly and is invariably a much-needed voice of reason in my life, he looked at it, he paused, and he said, I don't know about this. It's a bit strident. I'd think twice. Well, I thought once, and then I published the post anyway, and a few of my 30 followers reposted that post, and a few of them reposted it, and the article was picked up by a prominent journalist, now my great friend, Alison Pearson, I know Liam's friend too, and shortly after that, UsForThem and my career as a campaigner and activist was born. The ability to reset the trajectory of our country is with every one of us. With a little faith and a lot of courage, there is much we can achieve. Thank you for having me.